The story is about a young couple, Fabiola and Roy, and their little daughter, Teresa. Lately, Teresa has been experiencing nightmares about a large dog. This is because the neighbors have a German Shepherd who is not very kind towards her. After a basketball match, Roy talks with their neighbor, Chava. They both wish to enhance the relationship between their families, as things could be better among their wives. In the end, they come up with a plan to have dinner together that evening. Later, Chava and his wife, Anahi, visit their neighbor's place to invite them to dinner. Fabiola and Roy consent to go, but they can't leave their daughter alone, so they ask the neighbors to secure their dog for a while so Teresa can join too. Anahi reluctantly agrees but dislikes the notion of locking up her dog. That night, during dinner while the dog is secured, they discuss a bit about their jobs. We learn that Chava and Anahi met while trying to liberate pigs from a breeding farm. That tale is way hotter than we met on Tinder. It is revealed that both are actively involved in defending animal rights. As the dialogue continues, their dog, Jagger, suddenly begins barking very loudly. This annoys Fabiola as she thought the dog had been secured. Anahi then attempts to introduce Jagger to Teresa calmly, but the dog begins to bark again, startling the little girl. Enraged by the encounter, Fabiola grabs her daughter and storms out of the house. When she gets home, Fabiola vents her frustration on her husband. She feels that they have nothing in common with their dumb neighbors. She is also bothered by the fact that they treat their dog like a child. The next day, before heading to school, Teresa can't find her favorite doll. After searching everywhere in the house, she suddenly sees Jagger tearing it apart. Teresa bravely tries to retrieve her doll back and picks up a stone. However, before she can hit the dog, it counterattacks and ends up biting her arm. Before things worsen, Fabiola arrives with dog repellent and sprays it all over Jagger to scare him off. The scene then moves to the hospital. The doctor informs Fabiola and Roy that Teresa's wound is severe and she might lose mobility in her arm. The little girl needs to go to therapy to restore her mobility. When Chava and Anahi learn what happened, they visit the hospital and bring over a stuffed animal dog as a gift for Teresa. However, they refuse to apologize for what their dog did. Instead, they don't understand why Teresa was near their dog in the first place. Fabiola is clearly angry at the couple, so she refuses to accept the stuffed toy and argues with them. That night, Roy contacts the police to report the incident, but they say that it doesn't fall under their jurisdiction, so they're unable to take any action. Unwilling to give up, they decide to take further steps to address the situation. Fabiola insists on doing something about the dog. She suggests calling her friend Marcos, who is a lawyer and has some connections with the local authorities. Roy likes the suggestion, so he promptly calls Marcos and asks for his help with the issue. A few days later, the authorities arrive to seize Jagger. Anahi screams and protests, insisting they leave him alone. She even says they should take the girl instead, claiming that she was responsible, but they don't listen to her and forcibly take the dog away. At this point, the situation is completely out of Roy's control. His friend decides to take Jagger to an illegal kennel and have him put down in a very cruel manner. Back at home, Roy and Fabiola discuss everything that occurred. They question whether their actions were justified and start blaming each other. Roy regrets involving Marcos, feeling that they should never have called him in the first place. That night, the couple suddenly experiences a power outage in their house. In the meantime, Teresa wakes up from her sleep, claiming that she saw the dog watching her through the window all night. Her mother reassures her that it was probably just a nightmare and encourages her to rest. The next day, Roy and Fabiola find out the power outage was caused by someone tampering with the electricity near their house. They learn from a neighbor that they had seen Anahi lurking around their backyard the other night. The couple then decides to speak directly with Chava to prevent it from happening again. Surprisingly, Chava admits his wife's mistake and apologizes for the inconvenience. He also informs them that they have decided to leave their house and start fresh somewhere else. Before leaving, they leave a stuffed dog at their neighbor's house. Unfortunately, they also slash all the tires on Fabiola's car. That night, Roy and Fabiola feel much calmer as their creepy neighbors are no longer around. However, Teresa wakes up once again, claiming the dog is watching her through the window. This concerns the parents, and they eventually decide to investigate. As they check outside, they feel like someone is watching them. Roy then heads out to inspect the yard, leaving his wife and daughter safe inside. But Fabiola soon discovers that the burglar alarm isn't working. Meanwhile, Roy receives a call from Marcos, but he's too preoccupied to answer. Fabiola then receives the call on their landline phone, which she answers. Marcos informs her that he tried to investigate the creepy neighbors and found something very disturbing about them. It turns out Chava and Anahi were using fake names the whole time, and this is not the first instance in which they have done so. In the yard, Roy discovers a half-finished cigarette and realizes that their neighbors are still lurking nearby. Determined to end the supposed pranks, he sets out to find them. Back at the house, Teresa holds the stuffed animal dog in her hands and stays close to her mom. At this moment, Fabiola notices one of the windows is open and suspects that someone else might be inside. So the two lock themselves in Teresa's room for safety. As Roy continues his search for the neighbors, he is suddenly startled by a man wearing a dog mask. The man then attacks him and cuts open his knee with a sharp object. In the meantime, Fabiola tries to distract her daughter when suddenly they hear knocking on the door. They both decide not to open it, but someone from outside breaks the lock. It turns out to be Anahi, wearing another dog mask, determined to keep the intruder out. Fabiola uses all her strength to try and lock the door from inside. She somehow manages to injure Anahi's hand and successfully keeps her out. After a few minutes, there's another knock on the door. Thankfully, this time they hear Roy's voice. Although he is excessively bleeding from one of his knees, he has managed to make it to the room. The three of them are finally together, but sadly, they are unable to call for help. With no other option, they are forced to leave the room and search for a phone. Just then, they encounter Chava and Anahi in the living room, both wearing dog masks. They demand one thing: an eye for an eye, a life for another, meaning they want to kill Teresa for killing their dog, Jagger. Alarmed, Roy stays behind to stall them while his daughter and wife run to get help. Fabiola and Teresa make it to the neighbor Jorge's house. However, when they ring the bell, nobody opens the door. Fabiola then instructs her daughter to enter inside through the pet door. The latter manages to do so, but soon after, Chava attacks Fabiola from behind. Meanwhile, inside the house, Teresa finds Jorge tied up and unable to move. PETA goons are playing chess, and all the pieces on the board are pigs and cows. Chava then drags Fabiola back to her house and then leaves again to capture Teresa. However, when he arrives at Jorge's house, he sees that the man is free and protecting the little girl. Jorge, a local boxer, easily beats up Chava and leaves him injured on the ground. Following this, he and Teresa try to escape, unaware that Anahi is nearby. Just as they are running for their lives, she suddenly appears from behind the bushes and slashes Jorge's throat, thus killing him on the spot. In the meantime, an injured Chava returns to Roy and Fabiola's place. He reveals his plan to the captive couple: he will make their little girl Teresa suffer just like Jagger did. Chava then shows them an electrocution machine and a dog repellent, which will be used to torture Teresa. However, until Anahi brings over the little girl, Chava wants to have some fun with the couple. Roy, weakened from losing a lot of blood, asks for a drink and a cigarette, since they once shared a close bond. Chava agrees to his pleas. He confidently unties Roy and attempts to light up his cigarette. Unknown to him, Roy has a plan. Once he is free, he quickly grabs the dog repellent can and sprays it on Chava's face just as he is lighting a fire. As a result, Chava endures severe burns to his face, but he angrily retaliates by turning on the electrocution machine and zapping Roy, ending his life. Fabiola is severely disturbed to see her husband pass away, but she can do nothing but mourn for him. In the meantime, Anahi disposes of Jorge and returns home with Teresa. She sees her husband's face is entirely burnt and that Roy is completely dead. This devastates her, not because her husband suffered severe burns, but because he killed Roy. She wanted Fabiola and Roy to witness Teresa's excruciating death before killing them. Regardless, Anahi takes her husband to the other room to treat his wounds. While they are away, the little girl cleverly manages to free her mother. Just as they are about to escape, Anahi returns to the room. But before she can react, Fabiola grabs a bottle and smacks her on the head. As a result, Anahi falls to the ground and hits her head on a piece of furniture, leaving her unconscious. For an activist, she sure doesn't treat the trees very well. After a while, Chava returns to the living room and discovers his wife lying lifeless on the floor. Heartbroken, he grabs a knife and becomes determined to avenge her death. He searches the entire house and finally reaches the upper floor where Fabiola and Teresa are hiding. The two try their best to stay concealed, but the sound of the stuffed dog reveals their location. In a fit of rage, Chava begins to attack them, and Fabiola fights back with all her strength. She eventually manages to grab a hook and injure him in the neck. Chava is finally incapacitated as he groans in pain and slowly collapses to the floor. Seizing the chance, Fabiola and Teresa hastily get out of the room and head downstairs. They go to the living room where Anahi is lying on the floor. Fabiola quickly takes the car keys from her pocket as it is their only means of escape. After a while, the mother-daughter duo makes it to the vehicle and gets inside. However, just as they are about to start the engine, Fabiola, consumed by revenge, decides to make sure that Chava is dead for good. She leaves her daughter in the car and returns to the house once again. In the next scene, Fabiola grabs a golf club and heads upstairs, determined not to give Chava a second chance. She relentlessly strikes him until he is completely dead. With her revenge fulfilled, she heads downstairs to reunite with her daughter. However, upon reaching the ground floor, she discovers that Anahi is no longer there. This terrifies her, and she suddenly realizes that her daughter is in danger. Fabiola then runs outside only to discover that it's already too late. It turns out that Anahi, who was thought to be dead, was only unconscious at the time. When she woke up, she went outside and abducted Teresa. The scene then shifts to a police station where an investigation is ongoing to search for Anahi. Several pictures and newspaper clippings related to the recent gruesome incidents are attached to the investigation board. However, the detectives cannot seem to obtain any positive outcome. As time passes, days turn into weeks, but the police are unable to locate Anahi and the little girl. They remain missing, leaving no trace behind. Fabiola, who is now alone and helpless, desperately pleads with the authorities to bring back her little girl. At the same time, in an undisclosed location, we see Anahi, who has completely changed her appearance. She lives alone in an upscale house. We see her arriving at her place after grocery shopping. She then goes to the kitchen to prepare food, apparently for her dog. However, when she heads to the basement to offer the food, we see the grim reality. It is revealed that the food is for Teresa, who is locked up in the basement and chained by her neck and limbs like a dog.